In the anime, Ash said bye-bye to Butterfree, but what if we gave it one last mission to beat Generation 1 as fast as possible? About 4 years ago, I ran Butterfree, and despite the dated video and the really rough thumbnail, the title kind of nailed it. All powder, no power. Now, honestly, I didn't expect much from this run. In fact, I kind of dreaded doing it, and let me explain why. If I'm being glass half full here, 80 special and 70 speed, not that bad, pretty good. It's not elite, sure, but for an early game Pokemon, that's more than serviceable. Now, the rest of the stats, they are what they are, but what really caught my eye is the learn set. There's no way around it. Butterfree has a weird learn set. No stab moves, and in red version, your only damaging options are 2 lower tier psychic attacks. It honestly kind of feels like they wanted Butterfree to be psychic type during development, but that's kind of like a whole different can of worms. The real story for me is Sleep Powder, and I'm just gonna say it. I think Sleep Powder is probably the second best move in all of Generation 1. There's a hot take for you today. That theme will continue with the TM list. The only genuinely good moves are Psychic and Double Edge, even though half the community just hates Double Edge. Now sure, you got some supplementary moves like Mega Drain or Swift if you want to go that route, but why does this thing not learn Fly? I mean, it's literally a butterfly. Fly's in the name. Meanwhile, you can have like a little tiny Pidgey carry you across the entire map. It doesn't make sense. Make it make sense to me. And just to be clear, I'm not here to dump on Butterfree. In fact, early spoiler alert, this thing actually surprised me a good bit. And here's another side tangent for you. It's a pretty big pet peeve of mine when someone starts off a video or a stream with a mid to low tier Pokemon and they immediately spend the first minute of the video just trashing it. Now, come on, man, if it's that bad, why are you even doing the run? If you sound bored, frustrated, or like you're doing a chore right out of the gate, why should anyone even bother to care? You know what I mean? That mindset, it pops up way too often in the community, but I'll save that rant for another day. When it comes to the gameplay, I kept things simple with one goal in mind: overtrain early to take the pressure off of the roughest parts of the run. And even though Confusion looks like a little lowly 50 base power move, don't underestimate it. Psychic damage is really strong early on, especially in red version where Weedle actually shows up in Viridian Forest. Yellow version replaces all the Weedles with Caterpies, that's neither here nor there. And I'm going to start simple here. I'm going to take out the first 2 optional bug catchers, do the mandatory one, and then I'm going to call a slight audible. I'm going to do a bit of blackout grinding, just a little baby tiny bit. And you'll see in the footage, it's actually really hard to consistently lose this fight. You can't really control what happens, and I find that maybe getting 2 blackouts is about the max you can really do, so that's what I go with. After we finally do get the win, I'm going to be sitting at level 11, and that means it's time for the rock solid Pokemon trainer. There's not much nuance to Butterfree early on. I have Confusion and I use Confusion. Now the good news, it's a special move, so that means something like Geodude Defense Curl doesn't really matter, but there is one risk that you take with this level with Butterfree. You don't outspeed Onix. You could do a really quick wild battle, get up to level 12 and you would speed tie, or you could push it to level 13. Personally, I don't bother, I don't see a point. The only real way you lose is if you get a turn 1 bide. Now that can happen, sure, but if it does, I'm just gonna reset the run. And I think all things considered, getting a 12.5 minute Brock split, not really that bad at all. Like I mentioned earlier, getting extra experience early is the key to keep this run on track, and that mindset's gonna stick around just for a little longer. On Route 3, you almost always pick between the 4 Pokemon Bug Catcher or the Move Forward last, but today I'm going to be fighting both. And then when we get inside Mount Moon, there are several more optional trainers worth taking on. We got the fan favorite Super Nerd, we got the Double Grass Slash, and then I'm going to dip down to the Mega Punch Grunt, mainly just for a safety ether, and then I'm going to take on the Hiker. Now you'll see just how tight PP gets in this section. I'm going to go down to just 1 use of PP left at the end on the Fossil Nerd, but that does mean that I get to save the ether for later, or maybe I'll just forget, who knows. Still, having it now, it was a really nice backup just in case you miss a couple of ranges. And you'll notice right here, I also learned Bide. So while we take a look at Misty, we'll talk about why. Using Bide to get past Misty early, whether it's to unlock Bubble Beam or maybe just get a nice little chunk of experience, in my opinion, it's a seriously underrated strategy. Now, it's not the most consistent. You do need to put the Staryu to sleep just to avoid unnecessary chip damage, but you don't even really need great luck against Starmie. Now, in this attempt, Misty used Tackle and a Bubble Beam during Bide, and that was enough. I can just one-shot it, and I finished with 17 HP here, so I could have taken more damage, but honestly, this one doesn't really feel bad at all. Rival number 2 is easily one of my least favorite parts of the run. Might be surprising. Now, starting with Pidgeotto, you already know Sand Attack, it's a nightmare, it can be really bad. So I just take the risk here. I go for straight damage, and it just works out. And here's where one of the biggest issues in this run lies. Enemy Psychic types, especially early. Even this little Abra that literally just spams Teleport, can't even do damage, takes forever to deal with. Now, I find the best approach is just to use Poison Powder, start to get that little chip damage in, and then just follow up with resisted confusions. But I don't want you guys to lose sight of the fact that this is just an Abra and it was still a slog. Now, thankfully, the rest, not really that bad. I do use Sleep Powder at the end to avoid some damage, but that's pretty much it. Now, my friends, it's that time. Nugget Bridge contains the single highest cluster of mandatory battles in the entire game, but for Butterfree, spamming Confusion is the best we can do. Now, what that means is that most things are a 2-shot, but there are also several things weak to Psychic that are 1-shot, so it's not the worst in the world. It's actually pretty smooth. And just for the sake of PP management here, I do a few battles on the bridge, then I return to the center to heal. I think I could have used the Ether here. I didn't think about it. I forgot about it. But now, I'm gonna do a transition. Originally, I was very ambitious about this video, and I wanted to feature a 3-way Butterfree race. Now, the runs, at the end of the day, they were not as close as I had hoped, but I still have all the footage, and I think this run that I'm gonna show you is too interesting of an idea just to pretend that it didn't happen. But first, I want you guys to brace yourself, because it's not your normal type of run. The first thing you're going to notice is there's a Caterpie on your screen. Now, I touched on this on the very, very old Butterfree video, and I even tested it out with a Metapod, but this time there's some new tech to talk about. But first up, we do have this tutorial rival battle, and if you want to know how rough Caterpie stats are, just go try this fight for yourself, because you will likely have to reset a few times here. It's kind of hard to get a win, and what you guys need to understand right now is that this experience, winning this battle, is not optional. It's critical for me to get this experience now if we want this run to be successful. Now, before we get into the how and the why and the details of this run, there's a bug that I need to mention, and I'm not talking about Caterpie. This is something I completely forgot about, and I'm sure every single comment remembers it perfectly, but if you evolve or catch a Pokemon before you get the Pokédex, you deliver the parcel, the game will just soft lock. You straight up just can't get the Pokédex anymore. You can't progress. So just imagine my surprise when I ran into this bug during practice. It's just like a fun little nibble of Gen 1 information for you. Don't catch or evolve a Pokemon before you get the Pokédex. So how do you proceed with this run? What's the point? Basically, you deliver the Pokédex and then you grind on Route 1 for a pretty long while. It's not interesting. Sometimes you have to heal immediately after one single battle, and I find it's best to target the level 2 or 3 Pokemon here just to be efficient. But at the end of the day, keep one thing in mind, you're a Caterpie. The overall goal here is to get to level 7 to evolve into Metapod, everyone's favorite pod-shaped Pokemon. But let's take a look at why this failed in the red version all those years ago, because it's pretty interesting to me. While yellow version doesn't have true evolution moves, it does change some levels to make this possible. Now, if you look right here, you'll see that in red and blue, Metapod has hardened at level 1. And that means that even if you evolve to Caterpie like we're doing here, you're just gonna miss out. You don't learn Harden. Now, yellow fixed this by adding a second instance of Harden at level 7, which is the level that you evolve into Metapod. So now we can get access to a Caterpie that evolves and then gets hardened. Now something else I won't show about Yellow is that Butterfree does get access to the powder moves just a little bit earlier, and you get access to Confusion as soon as you evolve at level 10 rather than having to wait at level 12 for the red version. Now if you haven't figured it out by now, the experiment with this playthrough is to see if you can have a weaker early game if the trade-off is worth it to get a badge boosting move for the late game. Now I'm not going to spoil any conclusions here, but just to elaborate about why this failed all those years ago in Red and Blue is because you just can't get Harden on a Metapod unless you start with a Metapod. And if you're at that point, you have to deplete Harden PP and use struggle strats just to get the Metapod experience. It's very slow. And also remember, in Red and Blue, you're gonna have to go up 2 additional levels just to get Confusion on Butterfree. And at that point, it takes way too much time. And I know that's a lot of talking, but this concept of a run, I've been obsessed with it for quite a long time, years even. I don't even want to give you exact time frame, but I've thought about this run for a very, very long time. But just to kind of speed things along, I'm going to grind on Route 1 until about level 9, 250 experience to level 10, and then we're going to go to Viridian Forest. I keep it really short and sweet here. I'm just going to fight the first optional bug catcher, go straight to the mandatory bug catcher, and after our little pod tackles its little heart out, we finally are going to hit level 10. We're going to evolve into Butterfree, we're going to get Confusion online, and we are finally ready to begin the run. I make one last little stop here to pick up the Light Years Junior Trainer, and now we can finally take on Brock. There really isn't much change here except that Brock is just easier in Yellow version. That's usually why you would play Yellow version over Red version, despite everybody in the world just thinking Yellow is just harder overall. Brock's actually incredibly nerfed compared to the Red counterpart, but I digress. Lower levels means we just do a little extra damage, and Onyx has less of a chance to use Bide, which is basically your only lose condition anyway, so that's great. At the end of the day, we finished Brock with a little over 30 minutes of in-game time, and it is what it is. Now I know what you're thinking. My Red version run is already on Nugget Bridge fighting the single highest cluster right now. The hardened version just now beating Brock, and you are right to be skeptical, but let me kind of focus on what this run does right here in this section before we get to that. Once again, I fight both of the Route 3 trainers, and the only option I'm going to fight in Mountain Moon for this run is the hiker, and things overall go pretty smooth. Learning all the powders earlier in Yellow is a bonus, but for me it's the easier Rival 2 fight that made me really comfortable to cut out some more training here. But let me talk about the Butterfree runs a little bit more. Now I did a lot of playthroughs and testing for 3 different versions of Butterfree for this video, and the original plan was to do this like huge Butterfree bonanza for you guys. Now at some point during the runs, every run was pretty close. I thought I was cooking up something here, but I find often what happens with these race videos is that one discovery on another run will push another run, and then it'll kind of repeat the cycle, and they'll kind of push each other runs to do better than they could have in their own standalone video. Now with a very, very long Brock split, you already know that I had to cut corners and try to make up the deficit wherever I could, but in doing that, I started to open up my eyes into cutting even more corners in the Red version. And to give you guys an extremely early spoiler, cover your ears real quick, little Timmy, if you don't want to listen. The Red version run just came out much better. There's just no contest. But like I said earlier, the overall concept and the idea was just so interesting to me that I had to at least cover what happens in this run, because I'll be damned if I'm going to hang on to this idea in my head for years, finally do it, and then just scrap it because it didn't push Butterfree to new heights. This run is fun. This run is, I'm going to go ahead and say, a novelty run, and you will watch these highlights whether you want to or not. Don't even think about skipping ahead or clicking off the video, Michael. I'm watching you. Misty is more or less the same, but it's kind of worse with the bot strategy because she has Harden on this Starmie, and that means there's less of a chance to not attack, waste your bot, but it just works out here. And the real difference for me in this early game, like I alluded to earlier, are the Rival 2 and Rival 3 fights. Here you can see I didn't even care. I didn't even heal. Kind of a dumb risk in my opinion, especially when the early game is so long. I don't know why I did this. But with Sleep Powder, all things are possible. Jot that down, but I do make it through, and ultimately, I'm pretty much going to do the same strategy as the Red version run, where I take out some trainers, go heal, finish up Nugget Bridge. But for the next little small few sections of the game, both runs are about to be exactly the same. So let's go down to Vermilion on the Red version. Now let me touch on a truly awful fight, and then we'll get into another fight that can also be awful. This Dig Rocket Grunt has caused me so many problems. I talk about him so much in so many videos, but since this run specifically has so many problems with early psychic types, just watch this battle. I use an early poison powder. I get put to sleep multiple times. I start to fumble around. I don't know what to do. I'm in shambles here, and I eventually do get past this one, but this guy almost solos me on his own, and I think you guys really need to understand how much of a nightmare this fight really was. I thought about using early candies here. The next one is the triple Pidgey Junior Trainer. Obviously, sand attack, that's the answer. I've had resets and even had to reset the entire run here between all the playthroughs I've done. One little sand attack is all it takes. It can send your entire life spiraling out of control. But look at this really clean attempt I have here. It's really good to see this go smooth rather than talking about disasters, I guess. On the SSN, we do not get body slam because why would we get anything to make it easier for us? But we do fight the gentleman guarding the candy. Now I'm going to show the Ponyta here because I had to put it to sleep. Now if you don't know, it's something I didn't know until I did the Shedinja video. Ponyta only learns Ember to like level 75. So it's always going to spam it. And if it crits or it burns you, it forces you to use valuable resources like the full restore. But here we're going to see the biggest difference between how I routed red versus yellow. I'm going to hit level 25 after this battle, and I'm going to pop all 3 of my rare candies, hit level 28, and now let's start a truly awful gauntlet of bad fights. Believe it or not, rival number 3 is a step up from rival number 2. I hated this fight so much, I really don't even want to talk about it. But if you take a lot of damage from his Pokemon early, this one can be really tricky because once again, it comes down to an early psychic type. Now I'm going to utilize poison powder and bite on this Kadabra here to at least make it kind of fast. And I end up squeaking by here, but level 28 helped a lot here. And before I forget, you got to remember guys, in yellow version, he doesn't even have a Kadabra yet. He doesn't have any psychic types. Actually, when you get to rival number 6, he still only has a Kadabra. Doesn't really matter right now. I think we need to talk about Lieutenant Surge. We get 2 wildly different approaches in 2 different versions here. Now I use candies in red version to make this one manageable, but you still need to put the Pikachu to sleep because this thing loves to use Thunder Wave, and if you're paralyzed, this fight becomes basically impossible to win. Now I do miss the powder here. I get lucky. I don't get paralyzed. We progress, but things start to fall apart really fast. I outspeed, miss the sleep powder, get hit with Thunder Shock. I get paralyzed, but I survived the second Thunder Shock with just 1 HP, but Butterfree did not hear a bell. Despite the awful position, the awful predicament we find ourselves in, remember, Sleep Powder. I think it's the second best move in the entire game, and here's why. I hit it. That's it. I start chipping down the health, and through the power of Gen 1 Sleep, Butterfree takes down Surge with just 1 HP in a dream. In yellow version, I don't use candies, but I'm using a Hail Mary Omega level risky strat here. I'm gonna use Bide, but you're gonna see immediately why it's high risk. I get punched and then just kicked in the face before I can even blink, and just like that, we have ourselves a reset. Now this is possible because Surge does not have good AI, while red versions Raichu will always use Thunder Shock or Thunderbolt, so it's not really an option to use Bite on there. But on just the second attempt, I get a great combination of 2 Mega Punches. I hang on, I deliver a lethal, super damaged Bide, and we get past Surge here. Now this method does save you some candies, but there's an unintended consequence. It also makes the rock tunnel segment harder, and you might be thinking, hey, why would the rock tunnel segment be hard? We'll get to that. But first, I think we need to compare the 2 runs at this point. As expected, we are very far down in the yellow version due to grinding Route 1 with a Caterpie, but if you look here, you start to notice maybe a little pattern, a little trend, cutting out some battles, utilizing riskier strats. We've started to kind of chip away at the lead, but the hardened version of Butterfree at the end of the day still has a long way to go because we are at a 14-minute deficit. And now I would like to go back to the consequences of saving candies, and we're gonna start right here with the Rapping Junior Trainer. Now the ranges are not great, but for once in my life, ever in my life, I get a little bit of luck here. I don't get poisoned, I don't get paralyzed, and I make it through pretty fast, but the numbers are not great here. And if I'm being honest, even if you use candies like in the red version, you still don't have guaranteed one-shots. Now I was willing just to get paralyzed or something and just use my full restore here, so I'm shocked this went so clean, but you know, it is what it is. But once you get inside of Rock Tunnel, this is where true terror awaits, and it's another early psychic type. The Slowpokes here are absolute menaces, and once again, you got to use Bide. Yellow version has way more move constraints here, so I don't have Poison Powder to add a little chip damage, but it goes without saying that these guys are not fun to fight. Now this part of the game continues to pile it on with a Boomer Hiker. We are double weak to rock, I haven't mentioned that yet, and we don't have the best defenses, but surprisingly, this was never really a huge issue for me. You can actually tank a self-destruct from the Graveler, and if you have to, you can even tank a rock throw. You might be surprised at that. I wasn't even full health and I tanked a rock throw, but I have to at least give a shout out to this guy because I really expected it to be awful. Now it's time to transition to the mid game for both runs, and a lot of things are going to be similar. I'm going to start off with the Celadon buy. Both runs I'm going to pick up Pokédoll for Mimic, buy 2 Carbos, set up my repels, and then I'm going to leave. Now Yellow did have the luxury of being able to cut out an entire shot buy in the early game, pick up a Pokeball here, and we're just going to catch a Doduo. I think I'll talk about Doduo more in the Mew video, but we're catching a Doduo here, and from there both runs are going to do the exact same thing. We're going to race over, pick up Psychic, head over to the Rocket Hideout. I'm going to grab 2 PP ups, then we're going to pick up Double Edge, and that's finally going to give us a way to efficiently handle Psychic opponents. And even though we hold off on Mega Drain, Giovanni, not really that much of an issue. After that, it's time for Pokemon Tower, and you already know that rival number 4 is never really a problem, but let me talk about the mindset and maybe why I haven't done Erika in either run despite double resisting grass and having access to Psychic. The long and short of it are 2 reasons. Bag management, number 1, and Butterfree is kind of weak, number 2. If you did an early Erika as soon as you got Psychic, you can't even one-shot the middle stage Cool Trainer, so it's really not that fast, and Mega Drain is just a really weak move, especially if you don't get stab on it. Going back to bag management, this is something I always focus on, and it's really like the last little thing that you polish when you're optimizing runs. So let me talk about key differences between bags in each of these runs here, and I haven't really harped on it in a while, but in a perfect world, you would route each and every run to have full bags for 4 or 5 of the gyms, just so you can skip the yapping the gym leaders do when they're talking about their TMs. It would save you a good bit of time. And then you would plan out when to drop or when to use items just to continue the momentum of the run. In Yellow, which we're watching now, I'm going to pick up an additional item just to have full bags by the time I'm done with the Safari Zone, whereas in the red version, I'm going to keep 1 slot open at the end of this part of the game. As always, bag management and item management, it's always been a really fun part of these runs for me. I personally enjoy it, and I have a bag symbol on the overlay for you guys to follow along if you want to. Green means I have a few slots left. Yellow means we're 1 item away from being full, and then red means it's full. So it's very intuitive and easy to read at a glance. But to hop off of that tangent, this Yellow version is not even going to get or use Mega Drain at all. Now I can probably go into a lot of depth and show some numbers about how Mega Drain fails, but the long and the short of it is that it's a 40 base power move. Even when it's super effective, Psychic is still stronger. I'm going to show some footage of Koga's Psychic Jugglers, the first one specifically, and you'll see how Double Edge doesn't perfectly solve the problem. I'll come back to this in a minute, but instead I would like to talk about how this is where the runs become dramatically different. Now in Yellow, the final 4 gyms are a little bit tougher, but when you're using Harden like on this run, it kind of forces you on this path to do an early Koga. Now I actually mess up my experience just to be transparent. It's very slight, doesn't really matter in the long term, but ultimately I am going to use 6 of my 7 rare candies in preparation for this fight. At level 43, you have an extremely easy time with the first 2 Venonats, then you have like a 50-50 coin flip on the 3rd, and then Venomoth will likely always use Toxic, so you get a free turn to use Sleep Powder. The blueprint for this fight is really solid, and generally it turned out pretty well, but this just kind of sets us up for the next parts of the game, the important parts. That is going to segue us into a brisk swim down to Cinnabar, And let me touch on Yellow version a little bit more. I haven't talked about the vanilla or the regular Butterfree Yellow version run, and that's because it is more or less just a side grade of the hardened version, but in that route you would definitely not take on Blaine this early. The reason you rush Blaine is because for hardened to ever be worth it, you need the special badge boost that he provides. But what ultimately dooms this route, in my opinion, is that hardened is basically dead weight up until you get 6 badges. Early on, you could try to badge boost because you have Brock's badge, but you only have tackle, and that's going to get replaced with bide really early on from Misty and surge strategies, because you have to keep sleep powder, you have to keep harden, and you have to keep confusion. So the learn set's just really compressed there, and by the time you get double edge, there just isn't many spots it helps. Let me give you an example. The first juggler in Koga's gym that we just saw, you need to put the first drowsy to sleep, then you would need to set up all 6 hardens just so you can get the 3 drowsies into a pretty decent range, and there's still a chance that they would survive. And at that point, even using harden makes the battle that would normally just take 7 turns if you went straight double edge into like a 12 turn battle, so it's a net loss. You almost double the length of the battle using harden that early. Even in later fights, the turns come out to be about the same since you need to use sleep powder fully set up, and even then you're still not going to hit one-shot ranges in a lot of those late game fights. And I want to hammer this point home here. The harden strategy isn't the best, but it's very interesting. I think that if you didn't have to start off as a Caterpie, it might very well be the best version of Generation 1 Butterfree, but I do think the idea is worth exploring as someone who just likes to play and kind of document these Generation 1 solo runs for a little side hobby just to have fun with it. Outside of that, Butterfree, let's be honest with ourselves, Butterfree doesn't stand a chance of knowing whether or not TM28 is
Tombstoner, brother,
or not. So I didn't even bother to ask. It just has enough on its plate. It's been kind of a rough day, rough few runs, so I didn't even want to add more to it. Blaine is another one of those yellow version fights that's kind of weird. The team is definitely better, the moves are better, but they took away the good AI, so you're not guaranteed to get hit in the head with a flamethrower or a fire blast. And this is a fight where you can usually expect some resets due to shenanigans, but it really just comes down to the first few turns with Ninetales. You don't outspeed naturally, but you can outspeed with just a single harden, you have sleep powder, and you guys, you know what the ultimate strategy is going to be. Note that I did mess up my experience earlier, and the Blaine fight is the only spot where it really matters because I'm going to level up going into the Arcanine, whereas I would not if I did things the way I was supposed to. But you'll see that it just goes for takedown. I do have extra defense due to harden, so it's all good. I put the puppy to sleep, take him out back, and we get access to these special badge boosts. Now, it's been a long time since we went back to red version, but I can't stress enough how similar the routes were, and with the early candy usage, every fight through Rock Tunnel was just that much smoother, so we can just skip ahead. Like I said earlier, Koga was the real shift for both runs, but we don't need any candies here. We got Psychic, we can actually one-shot the Coughings, and the Wheezing will not use self-destruct due to good AI, and all that just kind of adds up to a pretty safe battle overall. Next up, red Butterfree is going to go to Silph, do a little bit extra here. The 10th floor for the Carbos and the Candy are in order, as well as a very tiny amount of extra training. I'm going to fight the Juggler on the 5th floor that I always forget when I route it in, and I'm going to pick up the Scientist near the Rival 5 Warp, and just like that, it is time for Rival number 5. Here I don't really need to focus on the micro parts of the battle, but instead I can tell you that this is the part of the game where Butterfree is severely lacking in terms of just raw power. This is where sleep powder becomes a crutch, and I'm essentially going to have to use it on each and every Pokemon in this battle. Pidgeot has super effective damage, Execute will always use poison powder, Gyarados and Alakazam, you already know they just have raw damage, and Charizard can do super effective damage on its own. Now notice how even the weaker Pokemon like Execute, they still take 3 hits from a 100 effective power move like Double Edge to go down, and Sleep Powder being 75% accurate is definitely a positive because you're more likely than not to connect. And I do fumble some turns, and I try things like using Mega Drain to heal on Gyarados, but it is a first try victory, and this battle right here is the blueprint of how pretty much all major battles are going to look in some capacity. Now let's rapid fire a couple of gym leaders since we already covered the similar route in the other run, and once again Blaine is overall less threatening in neutral matchups, but don't forget he has good AI in red version, meaning that something like Arcanine will always go for Fire Blast. There's honestly not much to say because I just hit all my sleep powders and I wail on them while they're unconscious. That is the way of Butterfree, and now that we have the special badge boost here, it's still huge even though we don't have Harden. For Sabrina, there's two things to note. Number one is that I used a lot of candies to hit level 52 after Blaine, and this is going to be a very rare late game fight where I don't need sleep powder. I just go straight double edge outside of the Venomoth, I tank whatever she throws at me, and I think this one's pretty cut and dry. Flipping over to yellow version, I want to show Giovanni because without Harden, sleep powder is required along with Mega Drain. But here's a great idea of how Harden battles are just gonna go. I used candies before this fight so I would not level up. I put the Doug trio to sleep, and after just one Harden, I do outspeed everything. But I just keep it to sleep. I get to that +6 defense. I badge boost myself as much as I can, and then I go for the sweep. Now I use that term with quotations. I use it lightly because I can only one-shot 2 of the last 4 Pokemon, but it's honestly not that bad. And if I had to say one thing about the Harden strategy and it just being a side grade, it does generally feel safer if you can get that setup in. Now another really cool thing about this fight is that even though we are double weak to rock, the Hardens let us easily survive a Rhydon rock slide, which is extremely powerful. If you want an idea for the damage numbers, at minimum, the worst it could ever do is 312 damage, and this thing can go all the way up to 792 damage on a max roll crit. Jesus Christ. And I don't need to tell you guys, that's a lot of damage for something with only 149 health. Red version is much more simple as you would expect, but I do play it a little bit weird. In all honesty, I thought that I would get like a tail whip or a leer from the Rhydon really fast, and it takes a lot longer than I would want. But once you get that one little defense drop, you essentially have one-shot ranges on the rest of the team with that one single badge boost. I do put Doug Trio to sleep, but everything else goes down. One tap it, and now both runs have all 8 badges. Sticking with red version on rival number 6, nothing in this fight is really that fast, and there are a good bit of problems, which doesn't really bode well if you're looking forward at the champion fight. Pidgeot once again, super effective damage, but with the Rhydon up second, we do have Mega Drain so we can get some of that back. So usually you wouldn't bother with sleep. I actually try once again to bait out some tail whips here, but after I fail, I quickly pivot off the strategy. I get a little bit of health back and we move on. Now from this point, nothing in the battle is great. If you don't hit sleep pattern to execute, you're gonna be poisoned. It's still gonna take 3 double edges. And on Gyarados, I make a mistake. I made it earlier in the video and I make it all the time. I talked about this a lot in older videos, but I always think that I can put Gyarados to sleep, use neutral Mega Drain to get some health back, and I'll just be fine. And time again, I end up with a net loss of health because it just doesn't go right. When will I learn my lesson? Probably never. I do eventually gain back control, but we're just not out of the woods yet. Alakazam outspeeds us, hits us for a lot of damage with Psychic, taking us to red health. I hit the sleep powder, but I want to beat the game as fast as possible, so I'm going to use double edge here. Now I'm calm and I'm calculated here, and I'm going to pause the footage, and I'm going to let you know how close this is going to be. This is the kind of quick math you guys need to be able to do in your head. I totally did this in my head at the time I was recording it. But double edge does 25% recoil damage. Alakazam has 123 health. What is 25% of 123? It's 30.75. And since everything in Pokemon rounds down, that means that we're going to take exactly 30 points of recoil damage into our 31 points of health, leaving us with just 1 HP in a dream once again. I do outspeed the Charizard. This battle, we're going to roll the dice. We're feeling lucky today, but eventually, at some point, when you're playing Butterfree, your luck will run out. I missed the sleep powder, take a flamethrower for massive overkill, and we have our first reset of the run. Hopping into the second attempt, I get everything I want from the first part. Alakazam doesn't do anything. It goes down painlessly, and I hit the sleep on Charizard. This one's over. I do a ton of damage with a Psychic crit, and I make a fatal error here. I think that I have the ranges to finish it off and save a turn, but never forget that Butterfree is always a little bit short in the damage department. It lives on a sliver of health. Another flamethrower melts our butter, and we have the second reset of the run. Now, ultimately, you already know how big fights, they just come down to sleep powder. You live and die by it on runs like this, and on the successful attempt, I just land the sleep powder, do the damage, and eventually we finally get past a really annoying fight. Looking ahead, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what happens leading up to the Elite Four. Red version is going to pick up the rare candy in Victory Road. Yellow version is going to skip it just to save a little bit of time. That's pretty much all that happens. But we do have one more opportunity to look at split data to give us some context and let me talk about it a little more. Things are very clear by looking at the results up to this point. The hardened version just sacrifices too much of the Brock split to remain competitive. The time fluctuates from split to split, but it's very clear that this would actually be pretty close if you had like 17 and a half minutes back. But what this comes down to is that I don't have to hide the times. We don't have to make for a suspenseful finish unless red version has like the slowest Elite Four time in history, but I don't think that's going to happen. And just to kind of reiterate the point, I think evolution to get a powerful move early is a very interesting concept. And if you could do it in a timely manner, I do think there's some potential here. Now, as it stands now, I can only personally think of one Pokemon off the top of my head that would probably be better if it evolved in the playthrough. And I do plan on exploring that as well, but let me ask you guys a question. I want your honest opinion here. Should Pokemon even be allowed to evolve in a solo run? If so, do you think there's a time limit? Let's say, you know, there's something like Butterfree that evolves before Brock fairly quick, but what if we have something that evolves at the 4th or 5th gym? It's really a line that I just haven't crossed yet, and more opinions are always helpful since I'm a one-man show and I don't really have anybody to bounce ideas off of, I guess. And before we get into that nitty-gritty and finish the run, let me just say that you might be thinking, hey, looking at these splits, Vanilla, Butterfree, and Yellow might stand a chance. But it's really not that simple. The hardened route, and specifically the speed badge boost, lets you just cut out a good bit of training, and the ranges in some of the tougher fights in the game range from awful to incredibly low. I do think that Vanilla, Yellow, Butterfree is a little bit faster, but I didn't really fully optimize it because I seen the writing on the wall, but I do think it's slightly better, and that's why ultimately I said this was a side grade. But that's enough talk. I think it's time we finally look at the Elite Four. I'm going to start with Yellow version, and Lorelei, we're weak to ice. When you're weak to ice, Lorelei is usually a problem, and the learn set here is very constricted. I've kind of touched on that a few times. We don't have Mega Drain, so we don't have that kind of like resiliency to get back some help, but the strategy here is to put the dugong to sleep, set up some hardens. I decided to go with 6 hardens because at that point you reach a break point where Psychic can 2-shot it and you can save a little PP, and ultimately it does let you save an elixir. Maybe it doesn't save you elixir, I might be making that up. But this one's kind of slow. If you want to be really safe, you can use sleep powder on everything. I actually decided to not use sleep powder on the cloister, and if it wants to freeze me or crit me, whatever, nothing I can do about that anyway. And like most Lorelei battles, this is going to come down to the Slowbro, just to be safe, because the Slowbro in Yellow version is massively improved. I put it to sleep, Mimic Amnesia, you already know, get to +6 there, and then even a resisted Psychic is a 2-shot on Jinx, and then we have a 2-shot on Lapras. Now if Lorelei wants to crit, there's nothing you can do. Lorelei loves to do that. If Lorelei decides you lose, but here, even though we like do something like crit on the Jinx, doesn't matter. We end up taking home the victory on the very first try, and that's very promising, especially at a fairly low level. It really just kind of shows you the power of sleep powder. Flipping over to the red version, it's roughly the same, but we do have Mega Drain, we don't have Harden, so you have to do things the old-fashioned way. Sleep powder into just slowly chipping things down, just progressing through the fight. The great thing about Mega Drain is even though I miss sleep powder on the cloister, I can get back a lot of health. And then on the Slowbro, it's kind of like an audible. This Slowbro is not really that good, so you could just straight up let it do whatever it wants. I find if it uses Amnesia or something like that, it gets a little bit too tanky and kind of just wastes more time. So just go for the little 75% sleep powder, put it to sleep, Amnesia, and at that point, a really boosted Mega Drain can get you all your health back. And there's only one way you lose this fight. You either get frozen or you get crit. What's going to happen here? Of course, I'm going to get frozen. So that's very cool. You can see me kind of flowing around the controller. I don't love it, but this is what Lorelei's known for. And when we run it back, you already know the strategy. Sleep powder set up, you're resilient with Mega Drain, you can get back some health. And basically the only way you can lose this fight is if you just get frozen or get crit. Luckily it doesn't happen on the second attempt. We make it by, let's move on. For Bruno, you can just go straight Psychic. It really doesn't matter. Red version, I can actually go Mega Drain on the Onyxes just to save some PP, but that's all there is to say. Let's move on. My strategy in red version Agatha was to use sleep powder on the ghosts that have hypnosis. Everything else just kind of roll the dice. If I get hazed or confused ray by Golbat, whatever, so be it. Doesn't really matter to me too much. You can always just fall back on sleep powder if you have to. Can't really use Mega Drain because it's resisted by every single Pokemon, so it doesn't really help. But it's fine. It's not really a bad fight overall. I just made sure that I was at 138 speed so that I can get past this first Gengar, and only the last Gengar would outspeed me, but it's not very good in red version. We're hopping into Lance, and I'm going to skip the last 3 yellow fights because it doesn't really matter. Use Harden 6 times and sweep through Agatha, and just like always in the yellow version, you mimic Ice Beam on the 3rd Dragonair, or the 3rd Pokemon, get Ice Beam and just sweep. But we actually have a pretty interesting fight here in red version. I get rocked early and have some bad luck against the Gyarados, so I go down to like 45 HP, and then I miss the sleep powder once again on the Dragonair, which means it uses Dragon Rage. I go down to 5 HP, and I'm not saying this to just make a meme out of it, but I genuinely mean it when I say that with sleep powder, all things are possible. I'm able to take it out, set up agility a few times, and now can I hit sleep powder? That's all it comes down to. Hit it on the first Dragonair, I hit it on the Aerodactyl, and just for some safety, I do decide that I want to use Mega Drain. It does okay damage, but more importantly, I'm not at 5 health anymore, and going into the Dragonite, I'm gonna miss the first sleep powder, but we recovered just enough health to where we can pretty easily survive a slam. I put it to sleep after that, and that's pretty much all she wrote. Pretty close fight. I think it really does show some of the resiliency of Butterfree, but with that said, let's go to yellow version's champion fight. So where do I begin with the yellow champion fight? It is awful, and I think that in the pursuit of trying to stay close to the red version run, I went a little bit too far and I cut a little bit too much out. I think level 60 would feel pretty perfect for this fight, but just straight up at the front, you already know the standard yellow version strategy is to take Earthquake on the Sand Slash, but I also just want to set up all my Hardens here. So that means that the Sand Slash is going to have to stay asleep for like 49 turns. So that means that already early in the fight, you're kind of just using up all of your luck. And real quick, while I'm here, before we get into what actually happens to this fight, you might be saying, oh, Mega Drain would be really cool for this fight. It's really not. Stop it. Don't even say that. Remember, super effective Mega Drain, still weaker than Psychic. And I could see some edge cases, maybe where if you get kind of low on like the Cloyster, it could be helpful to get back some health, but you still need to hit a sleep powder. What I'm trying to say, Mega Drain not as useful as you would think, but Sand Slash is a pretty easy problem to solve, not really the problem in the grand scheme of things. Where the problem comes in is being level 58 on Alakazam. Even at +6 on your defense with all the badge boosts into your attack, 205 attack, a 100 effective power Earthquake, it is still about a 33% chance to one-shot it. So that means only 1 out of 3 attempts you're going to get the one-shot range. Now the good news is that this is not the end of the world. It survives like it's going to survive a lot of times. Here it just rocks me with a Psychic crit. I'm having Parasect, I'm shaking, having Parasect PTSD flashbacks here, but it's fine. We're at 11 health, and let me introduce you to another problem, Executor. Now you could mimic Slash from the Sand Slash, and you'd have a slightly easier time here, but the problem comes later when you don't have Earthquake, because 2 of the final 3 Pokemon are weak to it, and you really would want to have it there. So what this ultimately means is that you have to hit Sleep Powder on Executor, and you have to use about 32 turns to take this thing out. If it gets a full restore, you might as well restart. It doesn't really feel that great. And this is going to be my first reset on the champion here. Alakazam just hit me too hard, and eventually you're going to push yourself too far, or you're going to miss a sleep powder. Executor puts me to sleep, uses a barrage, and that just kind of seals the deal. Now I'm going to have a lot of resets here. I'm going to have a ton of resets in the champion fight. I pushed it too far. You should definitely train just a little bit more on yellow Butterfree. This is the harden route too, but like I said, this is just in the pursuit of trying to keep the time as close to red version as I possibly could. Like on this second reset here, you can see that it takes me multiple turns to even chip down the Alakazam, which is absurd, but that's what you get for being a Butterfree with 45 base attack, being slightly under leveled at the end of the game. It's really hard to pinpoint exactly what the worst spot of this fight is, because the way I routed things and the way it turned out, out. Just every part was a problem outside of Sandslash. Executor you've already covered at length. You just don't really have anything good for it. It takes a lot of turns to take out. And now we can actually progress a little bit deeper. We got Magneton. Now, tragedy here. You have a pretty high one-shot range, and I say pretty high, not the best. It's like 56% chance. So you're basically taking a coin flip to one-shot this thing. And if you miss it like I do here and you get hit with a Thunder Wave, I mean, you can try to fight your way out of it like I'm gonna do, but Thunderbolt hits really hard. Cloister comes in, it also has super effective damage. And since our speed is cut in half with paralysis, that's gonna be another reset. And I'm just gonna show all these, most of them. I'll probably skip one or two of these resets, but it's just a little bit of a slog. The way this fight felt, the way Yellow version felt, it almost felt like Crystal version to me a little bit. This fight feels kind of like the Red fight at the end of Crystal, because the champion is on such a different level than everything else, even Lorelei. And I know this is a self-inflicted wound, but if I had to get to level 60 in this run, it just wouldn't stand a chance. Not like it really stands a chance here anyway. It's just a really long and just terrible fight. Not really much else to say about it. It doesn't help that I can't hit a 50-50 coin toss to save my life. But what I think is interesting is that even on this like third attempt here, I almost win. Like I have a terrible fight, but I get the sleep powders to land. I'm only at 13 health. And what this one comes down to, like ultimately the rest of the run's gonna come down to with Butterfree, is that I missed the sleep powder on Flareon. All I had to do was hit the sleep powder and this run's over right here, right now. But I think at this point, you guys get the gist of what can go wrong in the champion fight, how I sort of pushed it a little bit too far in routing. So let's just kind of breeze through the successful attempt. We are now at 7 resets. And when it all comes down to it, I think we all know what a successful Butterfree attempt is gonna look like. It means that we're gonna have above average luck. I don't even think it means above average. I think it means that we just don't get unlucky. Things just kind of go the way they're supposed to statistically. We do take out the Sandslash. I don't hit the range on Alakazam, but I don't get crit. Executor doesn't stay asleep the max amount of turns, but I don't miss sleep powders. I don't get put to sleep myself, so it goes good. And the one little bit of luck that really helped us fight along is that I do get the 50-50 range on the Magneton, take it out, and from there, I'm just gonna hit all my sleep powders, slowly chip everything down. You know how Butterfree goes at this point. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I level up on the Cloister in this fight. I felt personally that it was worth it to not level up during the Agatha fight and just kind of take it as it comes, because I do outspeed the last 2 Pokemon. I can use sleep powder, but that's it. This fight was terrible. I think the champion fight alone kind of disqualifies Yellow from being able to compete with the Red version. But at the end of it all, our little Caterpie starting Butterfree ends up with a final time of 2 hours, 47 minutes and 25 seconds, which isn't that bad of a time. It's comparable with like the Ninetales run, which is like 2:48, which is still like a B-rated run, which is pretty good, which should kind of give you some excitement for what we're about to see in the Red version run. So let's just kind of flip over to that real quick. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just say it. I loved the Red version fight because you get a chance to see something you don't get to see very often, and that's Sky Attack. That's gonna be our mimic target. It solves all the problems for Butterfree, but I will say a disclaimer, you're only using this because it gets stab. But this thing hits like a truck. 210 effective power with stab, and it's pretty much going to be the go-to move for this fight. It's going to be the MVP of this fight. So we take out Pidgeot. Alakazam still outspeeds us, but we can just kind of tank whatever. Remember that in Red version there is a Rhydon up third, so Mega Drain can get you a lot of health back. But I do put the Alakazam to sleep, and let's just watch that Sky Attack work. Clean one shot, easy. Alakazam goes down, and I do waste some time on Rhydon. Once again, for like the 3rd time in this video, having a Leer or a Tail Whip, having a couple of those will help out things such as making Executor guaranteed, and then kind of easing the risk on the Gyarados. We're gonna level up on the Charizard, doesn't really matter there, but ultimately I get what I want. Mega Drain can get us back to full health, and now we're looking at Executor. Now you could be a little coward and go for Hypnosis here, or Sleep Powder I should say, but for me baby it's all breaks, no gas. I'm going for the Sky Attack. You can do whatever you want, but you're gonna get hit with massive 420, you know what I'm talking about, 420 effective power going straight to the dome here. And for Gyarados, play it safe, put it to sleep. I actually missed the Sky Attack here, so I swap over to Psychic, but it doesn't wake up in time. I take it out, and now Charizard. I outspeed by 1 point, mind you. That's my favorite part of optimization, when you're just at this little point in the game and you just outspeed by a little one singular point. That's all we need. I hit the sleep powder. I start to rail off the psychics. Charizard wakes up at the very end, but all he gets to see is one more psychic coming his way. And that, my friends, is gonna end the run. Butterfree finishes with a final time of 2 hours, 28 minutes, and 16 seconds, earning a tier card rating of 88.04, and that is a fantastic run. Now I gotta give a full warning here. Relying on sleep powder for most of the major battles can be very frustrating, but this run overall went above and beyond what I thought Butterfree could initially do. Now for years, I've said Pinsir was the best bug type in Gen 1 by a country mile, but after this, I'm not really sure anymore. Now looking at the tier list, Butterfree now sits in the 21st spot, right among a cluster of Pokemon, just a few points shy of the A tier. And with that said, it is time for me to think about starting a wave of prestige reruns. Alakazam, Nidoking, Machamp, Snorlax, Kangaskhan, just to name a few. It's been about 3 years since I've touched those, and they're long overdue for a revisit. Now if one really stands out to you, let me know. I will be posting a community update soon with a poll. You can vote and we'll see which one we do next. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but we'll just watch out for that. I've got my eyes on at least 3 or 4 B tier Pokemon that could potentially move up. And I would say this is probably the longest produced video I've worked on in a while. So let me know what kind of content you prefer going forward. As always, let me know what you think. And if you made it this far, you're a real one. I appreciate you watching. Special shout out to my channel members and patrons. Your support means a lot, and I'm excited to bring a very powerful Pokemon to the next run. I'll see you then. Bye.